In Carl Jung's theory of the psyche, the anima is the inner feminine archetype within men. It's the gateway to emotion, intuition, relationship, and the unconscious. In a healthy male psyche, the anima works in partnership with the ego, enriching consciousness with emotional depth and connecting a man to his inner world. But what if a man had access only to his anima, with no ego to provide structure, no persona to navigate reality, no shadow to ground him in his masculine darkness? This is Daniel, a man completely possessed by the feminine archetype within him, and his existence is a study in psychological dissolution. Daniel wakes at 7 in the morning, and before he's even fully conscious, he's overwhelmed by feeling. Not a specific feeling about something concrete, but just raw emotion washing through him like waves. A person with an integrated psyche wakes up, and their ego provides structure. I'm awake, it's Tuesday. I have these tasks today. Daniel has no such structure. He just has the anima, and the anima experiences without organizing, feels without evaluating, responds without deciding. Watch him lie in bed for 40 minutes, unable to get up because he's drowning in emotional impressions. He feels the sadness of a dream he can barely remember. He feels the anxiety of the day ahead, but it's not specific anxiety about particular tasks. It's just free-floating emotional atmosphere that has no container. He feels drawn to stay in bed, not out of depression exactly, but out of a kind of dissolution, where boundaries between self and feeling have completely collapsed. When Daniel finally gets up and looks in the mirror, he doesn't see himself the way Marcus's ego would see clearly, or Derek's shadow would see hatefully. Daniel barely sees himself at all. His perception is entirely relational and emotional. He looks in the mirror and thinks about how his mother would see him, how his ex-girlfriend would see him, how some idealized woman might see him. His self-perception exists only through imagined emotional responses from others, particularly women. The anima, Jung said, is the man's connection to relationship and feeling. But without an ego, Daniel has no self separate from those relationships. He tries to choose clothing, but this simple task becomes an emotional ordeal. Each piece of clothing carries an emotional association, a memory, a feeling tone. This shirt reminds him of a woman who complimented it once, and now he's flooded with feelings about that interaction, that relationship, the loss of that connection. He's paralyzed by the emotional weight of each choice because he has no ego to simply decide pragmatically what to wear. Researchers studying emotional regulation would recognize that Daniel lacks what psychologists call affect tolerance, the ability to experience emotion without being overwhelmed by it, to have feelings without becoming those feelings. But Daniel's problem goes deeper than regulation. He has no ego to do the regulating, just the anima, generating endless emotional content with no structure to contain or direct it. Daniel arrives at his office, and immediately he's absorbed in reading the emotional atmosphere. His co-worker Janet looks tired this morning, and Daniel is flooded with empathic feeling. Not the healthy empathy that comes from an ego recognizing another person's emotional state while maintaining boundaries. This is merger. Daniel feels Janet's tiredness as his own, absorbs her mood, loses his own center in the process of being emotionally attuned to her. Janet mentions she had a difficult weekend, and Daniel is completely consumed by this information. He wants to know everything, wants to understand every nuance of her emotional experience, wants to merge with her suffering in a way that makes Janet increasingly uncomfortable. She came to work to be professional, to maintain appropriate boundaries. Daniel is violating those boundaries not through aggression, but through an overwhelming emotional neediness that has no concept of appropriate distance. In the morning meeting, Daniel's colleague Tom presents a project proposal. A person with an integrated psyche might have thoughts about the content, questions about the methodology, opinions about the approach. Daniel has none of this because he has no ego to think analytically. He only has emotional responses filtered through the anima. He's not evaluating Tom's proposal. He's feeling into Tom's emotional state, sensing Tom's anxiety about the presentation, becoming absorbed in the relational dynamics of who's supporting Tom and who seems critical. When the meeting ends and people are discussing the proposal, Daniel contributes nothing substantive. He says things like, "I could really feel Tom's passion for this project," or "I sense there's some tension in the room about this." These observations are accurate in their way, but they're useless for actual decision-making. An organization needs people who can think, evaluate, decide. Daniel can only feel, and his feelings don't produce the kind of concrete input that moves work forward. His boss approaches him about a project deadline that Daniel has missed. The boss is trying to have a straightforward managerial conversation about deliverables and timelines. But Daniel has no ego to receive this as professional feedback, and no persona to respond appropriately. He only has his anima, which interprets everything through an emotional and relational lens. Daniel hears his boss's words and feels rejected, unloved, abandoned. He's not thinking, I need to improve my time management. He's feeling, he doesn't care about me anymore. Watch what happens next. Daniel's eyes fill with tears. He's overwhelmed by the feeling of being criticized, which he experiences as being emotionally rejected. His boss, increasingly uncomfortable, tries to clarify that this is just about meeting deadlines, not personal criticism. But Daniel can't make that distinction because he has no ego to separate professional performance from personal worth. Everything is emotional. Everything is relational. Everything is about connection or disconnection. His boss ends the conversation quickly, makes a mental note that Daniel might not be suited for this role, and walks away feeling vaguely disturbed by the interaction.